Today we're talking about the man, the myth, the legend, Richard Hatch. If you're not familiar with Richard, he was the first ever winner of Survivor in Survivor Season 1, Borneo. Richard is renowned for his strategic brilliance and alliance building during the first season, but his journey extended beyond the island and had numerous legal challenges, including a very high-profile tax evasion case from the money he won from the show that resulted in 51 months of imprisonment. Today, we're going to talk about that and more. You're listening to the Idle Talk podcast. My name is Peyton, and I'm joined by my best friend. How are you doing today, Jacob?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here and start talking about the actual game that we've been watching. We just finished up watching Survivor Season 1 Borneo, and this was my first time watching the season. Going into it, I knew Richard was the winner, but I didn't know anything else about the season. But you personally had seen the season beforehand before we decided to watch this through.
Yeah. But I hadn't seen it, and I mean, man, maybe I watched it in middle school. So at this point, it's been a decade since I've seen it. So it's been a little while, but I definitely remembered a lot of key moments. I remembered, like, Sue's iconic speech at the end. I remember that. I've also seen that on TikTok.
Yeah, I surprisingly, I had never seen that. So that was funny when we watched that together.
Yeah, no, that was pretty crazy to me that you, like, didn't know that was coming. Thought that was a lot of fun. So, like, I knew that. Like, obviously, I remembered the moments of, like, Richard walking around naked. Remembered he won. Remembered, the iconic, like, relationship between him and Rudy. Like, there's a lot of that stuff I remembered, but a lot of the, like, gameplay and the challenges and the interpersonal dynamics, I didn't remember all of those details. So it was still kind of like watching it again for the first time, but I still was already familiar with Richard as the winner before we started.
Yeah, so we just wanted to take some time and analyze Richard's gameplay and maybe compare it a little bit to how the game operates today and talk about how he won. We think he was a deserving winner and what he did with the money and stuff like that. So you want to get into it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think to get right off the bat, did he deserve to win? Yeah. Like, I think it can be unanimously agreed that he was the most deserving person of season 1. Like, I just don't see a case for anyone else there at the end, just considering the way he played the game. It's a little different because he was also the only person playing it as a game. Everybody else was there surviving, and he was out there playing Survivor, which is a pretty, like, big distinction, and it's very clear when you're watching it, especially when you've seen recent seasons. It's like he had seen the future of what Survivor was going to be and was playing the game before it became the game. But that's just a product of he invented the way Survivor's played. Like, he is like, if there's a Mount Rushmore of Survivor players, like it or not, Richard Hatch is on that.
He's the
George Washington of the Mount Rushmore. And then you've got Sandra up there, right? You've got Boston Rob. And then, I don't know, I'd probably put Parvati up there, but
yeah,
there's a lot of people you can place that fourth spot. Like, I don't know, because the fourth one on the actual Mount Rushmore is Teddy. So it's like,
isn't there one of them there who isn't even actually a president, or am I making that up?
No, you're making that up, because it's Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt.
Oh yeah, I think it's just because everyone gets Jefferson mixed up with Thomas Edison, who was not a president. And
yeah,
you were like, Thomas Jefferson wasn't a president, but if you watch Hamilton, like as many times as I have,
Jefferson was president. He was second. But so yeah, they have the like 3 pretty notable presidents, and then, like, I mean, Roosevelt was notable, but it's just kind of like also like, why is he the one that's up there? Like, it's like there's a lot of other presidents, and it was just interesting that he made the cut of all of them. So I feel like you could throw a fourth wild card out there. I don't know who would go on the Mount Rushmore. Maybe once we get through all the seasons, we can come back to this and make a Mount Rushmore. But I think whether you like it or not, Richard Hatch has to be on it because he is like the founding father of Survivor. Not even modern Survivor, just of Survivor and the way the game is played. I'm really interested to rewatch season 2, now kind of going in right after seeing season 1 to see how people play it. I kind of want to know, because, like, they saw most of, if not all of the first season of Survivor before filming started on season 2, when I was kind of looking at the dates and timelines. I don't know how early they got to Australia because they're out in the outback, so I don't know, like, how long they're actually out there, how much they saw of the final of the first season, but I just want to see how he changed the season immediately after, and I imagine he probably has a decent impact there, and he surely had an impact on the way that the game was planned out and the way that mechanics worked. In the same way that like Russell kind of changed the way immunity idols worked in Samoa. Like Richard Hatch changed kind of like even just mechanics of the game going forward. I imagine it was mostly inspired by the way that he played the votes and played like the alliances and tribe dynamics and all that stuff.
Yeah. Getting back on like the question of do we think he was a deserving winner? I definitely think between him and Kelly, I think he deserved to win solely based on the way they played the game, because when you watch the season, and especially whenever they're giving their final remarks to the jury, and Kelly starts off by saying, don't judge us by the way we played, judge us by who we are as people and how we've interacted with you and things like that. And then Richard goes, nah, don't do that. You need to vote.
When you're playing a game, you should vote based on how I played the game.
Yeah.
Which,
and so
valid.
I think from there, that sets the precedent of how Survivor is played for the rest of 44 seasons. Because if Kelly had won, especially if she had won in like a demanding vote, like if she won like 7-0, then that sets the precedent of, okay, yeah, you don't play the game cunning, you don't be a snake, you don't try and make alliances and do all these sly things to try and win. You need to be like an honest person because people will respect that. Well, so I think that's like a really like defining point in terms of like Richard winning.
Yeah, the thing is though, I don't think like Richard was ever a dishonest person.
No,
yeah. And that was the thing that they said, is that he always played with integrity. So I would actually almost even argue maybe it's a little bit opposite of that, where like it did set a precedent that you do have to have a level of integrity. Like there's a reason that Russell cannot win, is that, I mean, you can say he played the game better than anyone in his, the 2 seasons that count. The third one really doesn't matter. He was out so fast. So it's like in Samoa and Heroes versus Villains, like he played the game. Maybe you can say he played the game the best of anyone, but there's that crucial element of playing with integrity. People are not going to vote for you if they don't like you at the end, or they don't want to vote for you, And like that's where you see people win who a lot of times people complain and say they're not deserving winners. You'll have that like with Michelle or with, whoever, winning. There's people that'll make that argument. And a lot of times it doesn't come down to them being the better winner. It comes down to the other option. People don't feel like they can cast the vote there for whatever reason. And a lot of times I think it stems from them feeling like they didn't play with integrity or something, whether that's true or not.
Yeah, I think what I mean is like you can be cunning and you can still be honest. Like you can be like sly and you can still like be honest. Because I mean, Richard was cunning. He came in with a plan and he executed that plan, and he wasn't afraid to not be friends with people, because that's what he wasn't there to do. He wasn't there to make friends. He was there to win $1 million, which he did.
Yeah, he said that.
And so, like, I think he was upfront about it, and I think that's why why the jury respected him and why he got the votes, because he was upfront about it. He wasn't trying, as nice as Kelly was, she was a little two-faced about it in the sense that
I would say very two-faced.
She was a part of the alliance when it benefited her, and then when people started calling her out on it, she was like, "Oh no, like I'm not in that."
Yeah, she didn't want to be.
I don't want to be a part of the alliance. And then, but Richard was just straight up about it. He was like, "Yeah, I formed an alliance. I did this. I pulled this together. I did it because I knew it would win me the money."
Yeah, you see that a lot in their final kind of remarks and statements when they're being interviewed by the jury, where like she says she regrets joining the alliance, and that if she had another chance to play through, she wouldn't do it. Which, if she doesn't do it, I don't think she makes it to the end of the game.
Absolutely.
I just don't think there's any shot. I just don't think she goes along that far. I think Richard gets rid of her because she's a threat. Like, it's clear she's a threat. She won 5 challenges in a row. But I think, but then you've got on the flip side where Richard's like, I wouldn't change anything other than be more aware of what other people are planning. He was like, maybe I trusted people too much. But he stood 100% behind the alliance and was like, I played this way. I'm not ashamed of playing this way. And she was just like pandering too much, where the way she was pandering, she's not going to get the vote of the people in her alliance. Like she didn't get Rudy or Sue, and Sue gave her big old speech about it because she didn't want them. And by alienating those 2 votes, she also then alienated some other votes. Now, granted, one of those votes was Greg, which was literally just a coin toss.
Yeah.
Pick a number, stupid thing. So, like...
Also, the fact that he chose 9 as the number that was the deciding number. That's wild.
Yeah, that's insane. It's just whoever picks the higher number, I guess. Yeah, that I don't know. And that's one thing that I wanted to talk about is like, I mean, if you look at it that way, 3 votes, and then there was a 50-50 between Greg, where Greg didn't actually pick someone to win. So if it goes the other way and Kelly Wigglesworth wins, like, I mean, what does that at all? What does that impact about like Richard's game? What does that do for Survivor going forward? Is Survivor successful going forward? Does Survivor strategy look the same moving forward? There was a lot of stuff on this season that was based on like randomness with like Sean's voting strategy, Greg there at the end, a lot of people just like voting their conscience and their gut, not talking about votes. And that's a lot of it just, it wasn't a strategic game yet and people being too attached to one another and not wanting to vote. But like, imagine it went the other way. It was literally like it was basically a 50-50 shot in the dark. Who's gonna get this, you know?
A note for anyone who finds themselves in those situations, Kelly, you should have picked 6, because if Richard picks 7, then he only has 7, 8, 9, and 10. But then if you pick 6, you have 1 through 6. So if you're ever you find yourself in that situation and someone picks a number, you always want to go second when picking the number. You always pick a number right next to theirs and then pick the side that has more numbers on the other side of it. Just a helpful information if anyone finds themselves in that situation where $1 million might be on the line. Give yourself a better chance.
Well, what if he picks 6? Then what side do you pick on?
You pick 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then he gets 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I mean, it's just even. So
yeah, but I'm saying
keeping the odds.
Yeah,
even.
but I'm saying Kelly picked 4 or 3 or whatever. So then Richard would get, if you're going by who's closest, Kelly gets 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Richard gets 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Kelly had picked 6. She get an extra number, and
yeah. She gets one more. But what? Well, the other thing though with that is like, you also can't be totally mathematically objective about that because it's Greg picking the number.
Yeah.
And so it's like
he could have said like 0.2.
You never know what that man's a character.
Yeah.
I don't even want to like, if we were ever gonna like do episodes on characters from Survivor, like little mini episodes, I just don't even know what we would do about him. It's just, I don't know, man. He's weird. He had like a really cringe moment with his sister in a video, and he insinuated that incest was a thing. And if you're listening to this and you haven't seen Survivor Season 1,
go watch it.
I mean, I would say it's worth a watch. I think maybe should we leave that verdict? Good or not good, worth watching? I mean, we can say yes.
Yeah, I would say it's worth watching.
Worth watching. Greg is a character, but it's not even worth our time to explain what the character he is. I think it's because he's kind of underdeveloped as a character. I think a lot of the people here, like, they're all interesting characters, but they're not like developed that fully, which is weird because they get a lot of screen time compared to like modern Survivor. But modern Survivor, they feel more fleshed out, but it's because it's like strategic focus, and back here it's more personal, and I don't know, it's kind of weird dynamics and stuff.
Yeah,
but
kind of moving away from the winning aspect of it, more moving into Richard on the island, moving into like his providing for the tribe, which I thought was really interesting. The fact I did not expect Richard to be kind of like a huge provider for the tribe. I thought that was really interesting.
And a really talented spear fisherman.
Yeah, and the fact that Sean spent who knows how many hours sitting there trying to fish, could not catch anything with his super rod 3000.
So much. Absolutely true.
His super rod 3000 was unsuccessful.
It was Sean, and who else? Was it Dirk that was with him, or?
I think so. Yeah.
I think it was Dirk. But yeah, they would just always go out and be fishing and never catch anything, and then he'd come back with stuff, and then they'd get all upset because it wasn't real fish.
He'd bring back stingrays, and they'd be like, "You're not bringing back fish. You're bringing back stingrays. Stingrays are fish." Like, at least he's providing.
And then Rudy burnt the stingrays. Yeah, that was it. I really thought Rudy was a goner. I was like, man, they've got this alliance in their friends, but Richard was pissed. But I'm glad he saw past it.
But yeah, I think that's another thing that's just kind of different from Survivor today is being a hard worker for the tribe and being a provider is really important. But it seemed like it carried a lot more weight than it does today. Whereas today, it seems like they're okay if they starve. They just want to get out who they want to get out. It doesn't matter if you're providing for the tribe in terms of that. They definitely try and get out weaker players. But it seems like if you can provide something really valuable to the tribe in terms of Rich providing fish, that saved him for multiple votes. because people were literally saying, we want to get out rich, but we don't want to go hungry, which is really crazy.
Yeah, I think, well, and part of that, though, is like also, I mean, in the modern Survivor, people go out there prepared and expecting to starve for the entire duration of the show.
Yeah.
They are preparing to not eat anything but maybe a little bit of rice. Like, they go into the show knowing that. Whereas this, being the first season, nobody was ready for it. Even though they were told and they knew it, and they even went out there with like a lot of stuff, they still just were not ready. They were not mentally prepared. So the fish, I don't think had any real physical benefit to anyone. Like, sure, they got some protein and it was some food, but they had plenty of rice. I think they were more well-fed than anyone in Modern Survivor.
I think it's also more of like a morale booster. That's
where I was going. We're getting totally a mental boost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like getting something different. It's like real, quote, air quotes, real food.
It's protein.
It's protein. It's, something that they got as a tribe kind of sort of thing and like did it. And, it's totally a morale thing. And having that constant supply, I think that's part of why that tribe, why Tagi was so much just more unified also than Pagong, because Richard was doing that before they merged.
Yeah.
And then that, I think, just translated into the merge, that he had a firm role as like the leader of Tagi and was able to carry that alliance all the way to the end, to the final four.
Yeah.
Even though Kelly Wigglesworth didn't want to be a part of it, apparently.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I think it's interesting that four happened. I mean, it was Rich who organized it and carried it out, and that's how it was seen through to the end. But you really don't see strong tribe alliances happen as much anymore. Tribal lines tend to get blurred a lot more in the merge in the Survivor era. It definitely didn't happen as much with the most recent Survivor season, because it was very obviously dominated by the Reba 4.
Yeah.
And the previous season was the
Tika 3.
The Tika
coming
3.
through, and then like the war between
I think that's kind of a result of all the twists that have been happening in the season.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily because of just the people dynamics, just because of the twists. But I think like as you get into the later seasons, like the teens and the 20s and the 30s, you don't really see super dominant post-merge tribal alliances banding together as much. So it's really impressive to see that in the very first season, Rich was able to mobilize a super strong alliance that's stuck together until the end. And it really shows how powerful a unified alliance can be in Survivor if no one jumps ship.
Yeah, and the really interesting thing to me about the Tagi 4 and about the group that Rich pulled together is they are the most unlikely group.
Oh, yeah, it's a rag.
I don't know how, like, watching the first episode, and you see that dynamic between Rudy and Richard, and you're like, okay, Richard is a gay man, not afraid to say it, show it, like he is who he is, he's unapologetic about it. And it was like, it's awesome. But then you've also got like Rudy, who is this, 45 years of service, Navy SEAL veteran, old man. Like, I think he's in his 70s, I'm going to assume.
Oh, yeah.
In the show. Sure. Like, got to be in his 70s. And he's, very different generation, set in his ways, conservative, not afraid to voice his strong, there's no other way to say it, but homophobic sentiment.
Oh, yeah.
Just straight up.
Yeah.
Like, but it's also weird because, like,
but it's weird
it's
because
it's never malicious, though.
Yeah, it's just,
or it doesn't seem like
it's just Rudy being who he is and who he was raised
as. And he's like, and that's something that's really cool, is that Richard, he does, like, they don't agree on this thing, obviously, but he sees and constantly reiterates that that's just the environment he's raised in, that's his upbringing. He's not going to change a whole life of learned prejudice or learned whatever in like 39 days. That's not going to change. He knows that, but he's like, we're out here on the island, we're not going to put that, we can put that aside. And their ability to not even, like, that, it was a non-issue, and they became the closest to, out of everyone out there. They were the strongest duo of any of them. And you could possibly say they're one of the strongest, like, duos in terms of sticking together, like, ever in Survivor, outside of, like, showmances and stuff. Like,
I think
they
that's
were strong.
One of just kind of the beautiful things about Survivor is, like, the unlikely pairing of people
Mhm.
and the people that stick together, the duos and the alliances that stick together. Most of the time, the most successful ones are the people that in real life would never interact with each other or have anything to do with each other. So it's just really interesting to see that microcosm is already existing in Survivor in its very first season.
Yeah, and I think that is so like Survivor was started as it was a social experiment. And I think that's one of the areas, the interpersonal relationships is one of those things that was the most successful part of it, like the social experiment part of it is seeing how these people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different experiences, different age, different, like just diverse people. And obviously Survivor is a lot more diverse now than it was then even, but still, like, it was a very diverse show, especially for 2000. And they're putting all these people on an island and seeing what happens. And what we see there, I think, is really unique and cool. But yeah, so, I mean, saying all that to say that Richard's ability to get Rudy in on the alliance when he was very hesitant at the beginning, didn't want to be a part of it, but eventually came on and like
literally said that he would, as soon as they leave the beach, never speak to him again.
Yep. Yeah, it's something where it's like, yeah, they are not friends. They have an alliance. They're going to get through it. I assume they probably didn't really ever talk after that. I mean, why would they? They have no need to. But on that island, they were a unified pair. And then Sue, who like seems like totally like abrasive sort of personality, very
redneck, pull yourself up by your own.
Well, she's Midwest, like,
yeah,
but very in the nicest way possible. She's very loud, and that's not in like a derogatory way, but she's outspoken. She's not afraid to speak her mind, be present. She's not like Kelly was always kind of like in the shadows, like going kind of through, not wanting to be too big, not wanting the eyes on her. And Sue's like just unapologetically herself. And we see that especially like in the final like tribal council where she's giving her infamous speech, the rats and snakes. Like she like goes for the jugular.
Yeah.
And like literally just like roasts the crap out of Wigglesworth. And it's bizarre. And so it's like she's got that personality that can a lot of times come off as kind of abrasive. And then you've got Rudy, who's this, older conservative man who his opinions and stuff can come off as abrasive. And then you've got Richard, who is pretty seriously arrogant, but never ignorant of that, but pretty arrogant and can be abrasive. You have these three abrasive personalities that come together. They put aside their differences and their big personalities and whatever, and they go all the way to the end together. And then you've got Kelly, who is in on that, but doesn't really want to be on that and all this other stuff. But even her going along with it the whole time, like the four of them, it makes no sense. But they were the final four left standing, and they pulled it off.
Yeah.
Granted, a big part of that is Pagong played a stupid game.
Pagong literally openly and avidly denying that not all of them, but some of them.
Specifically Jervis.
Yeah. Openly and adamantly denying that there was an alliance, even though for 3 votes in a row, there was a block of 4 voting for the same, or all voting for the same person. And they said, no, there's no alliance, and
it's just crazy coincidence. Everybody wants out Gretchen for some reason.
Yeah. So the fact that they were their own downfall, basically. They had no excuse to lose but themselves just not recognizing that what was going on and not having any awareness to the situation.
Or like when they recognized it, not doing anything about it.
And I think
like Jenna recognized it and Colleen recognized it, but they couldn't get Greg and Jervis, and like they couldn't get everyone together in time, and it was too late.
And honestly, what I think is probably Richard's winning move is the one time he won immunity. The one time he won immunity is the one time where his name was severely on the chopping block.
That was his birthday.
Yeah,
right?
It was his birthday, and it was when Wigglesworth was starting to feel bad about being in the alliance, and she wanted to flip, and Jenna and Colleen were wanting to get out Rich, so they would have had Jenna, Colleen, Jervis, and Wigglesworth enough to get out Rich, because it would have just been Rich, Rudy, and Sue left. So they would have had 4.
They would have had him. He was able to win when he needed to. He wasn't like
and he didn't even
challenges.
He didn't even know. I don't think it's crazy that I don't even think he knew that he was at risk of going home. He may have had some inkling, but I don't think it was to the extent where he went into that challenge thinking, I need to win this or I'm going home tonight.
Yeah, he found that out later because that was the whole thing where he was like, that was his one regret from the season was that he trusted people too much and didn't realize that he was going to be going home.
Yeah. So that was literally his game-winning move,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's all really good. I think let's take a very quick break and we'll come back in and let's dive into, some really specific moments of his gameplay and maybe kind of relate that to maybe I would really like to discuss, all right, how do we think Richard would play if he was on Survivor next season?
Yeah.
Like how that would play out in modern Survivor. So we're going to take just a second here and we'll hop back in.
So I think we would be remiss if we did not talk about one of the biggest points of the season and Richard as a Survivor player,
Mm-hmm.
which was his
He's
nudity
naked.
throughout the entire season.
Naked boy.
So when I came into this season, the only thing that I really knew about this season was that Richard won and that there was someone nude on this. I didn't know that it was Richard. I didn't know any of the circumstances of it. I didn't know who it was. I just knew that there was someone who was nude and that they were a guy.
Okay, well, real quick. When the season started and we're introduced to all the castaways, did you remember that and try to figure out who it was?
Whenever they introduced all the castaways, I was like, oh, it's Richard.
Okay. I didn't know. It would be funny if you were like, is it going to be BB? Is it going to be Rudy?
I knew it was
who's it going to be?
I knew it was like a middle-aged guy.
Yeah.
So whenever
it was
whenever
just some white
they
dude.
brought up all of the people showing the introductions, I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure Richard was the one who was nude this season.
Mm-hmm.
But I also went into it thinking that he did it for strategic means.
Yeah.
I didn't know that he did it just because he liked being naked.
Yeah.
I thought everything whenever I had seen clips of that, everything that I heard and thought I knew about it was that he did it for strategic reasons and to get into people's head and almost as a superiority complex and showing look how comfortable I am, look at how confident I am. I didn't know that he did it just because he liked being naked around the beach.
Yeah, he has a very European philosophy when it comes to his body and that he's very, open about it and just it's natural, it's normal, it's not weird. Whereas in the US, there's a lot of stigma around nudity. It's just not a thing that's normal and okay. And even when there's nudity in a movie, it's just almost always just interpreted as sexual. And that's just kind of the way it is in America. That's just the way it is. And he doesn't view it that way, even though he's an American, which is interesting. And it's part of why it's hard for me to believe that I just don't think there's any way this Survivor genius, who came in with the strategy and dominated the game and all this sort of stuff we're talking about, there's no way he wasn't aware that it would make people uncomfortable.
I think on some levels he knew. Because especially
I think you have to. I don't think you can be that ignorant of the stigma that you think everyone's going to just be okay with it.
And especially the fact that he was of the mindset where he was just going to do it, and then if people told him that it made him uncomfortable, then he would put on clothes.
Yeah, it's the whole philosophy of it's ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah,
that whole idea.
Yeah, so it was very interesting to see, and it's just if that happened in modern day Survivor, I think CBS would 100% have a sexual harassment case on their hands. Even if
at the very least they would be just eviscerated on social media. Yeah. I don't even know if they would air it. I just don't see that making air today because it would I don't even know if production would allow it on the island.
Yeah.
I think they'd tell them no. Just because it's one thing if you're skinny dipping and taking a bath, cleaning off. That's how you do it on the island or whatever.
The challenge where you went wallowing in the mud.
Yeah, or if you're out in the middle of the jungle and you're taking a dump, or something, whatever you got to do there. That's its thing. But it's different when you're walking around, strolling up to the fire, sitting down, crossing your legs, just vibing.
Mm-hmm.
At least he wasn't man-spreading, and really asserting not he was being, I guess, as modest as you can be in the nude.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it's just such a bold move, and it's incredibly impressive on one hand that he managed to win given how abrasive he kind of was. We kind of already mentioned that, but like how he wasn't afraid to just be himself.
Yeah.
And he's like, I want to be naked. I'm just going to be naked. And they don't like it. They can vote me out. And they never voted him out. And that's part of like his, getting fish and his strategy and his alliance and all that stuff. But like the fact that like even Rudy was able to be like, you know what? I don't like it, but he's my ally, but I gave him my word. Like that's crazy, and pretty awesome. So very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a really big part of the Richard Hatch game. Like that's what people remember. Like if you throw up a video of, ranking all the Survivor winners, I would be shocked if you don't mention the nudity. Like it's just, that's kind of like, it's just iconic.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's just kind of become iconic now.
Do you think on the Mount Rushmore of Survivor players, it's full body for him?
No, I think it's
you think it's just the head? Okay. It could be. It's pretty iconic.
I think we have to also talk about Richard's life post Survivor.
Yeah.
There were some things that when we did our research, things that I learned that I was not aware of. I also think some things that you didn't know either.
Yeah. So, I think the big thing is that, he won $1 million and a Pontiac Aztek, which, it's a lot of money. It's
which
a car.
I didn't know they gave the car. That's so
yeah.
cool.
I don't know how long they do that for, but I feel like I remember them doing it. Maybe I'm remembering it from this season, but I feel like I remember it from Outback, like the Outback one, like season 2. I think they give a car away again.
Do they give them a 2001 Pontiac Aztek instead of 2000?
I would assume. I think they're giving them a new car. Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah. Give away a used car with your $1 million.
I'm interested to see if it's still a Pontiac Aztek or do they change it up next season.
The thing is like, did they have Subaru Outbacks back then?
I don't know.
I don't know when that started, but
placement.
That's when they should have done. Like they should have gone to Subaru and been like, "Hey, you got to give away an Outback." like that is like the season to do it.
Yeah,
that would have been pretty epic. But I assume if they do it, it's a Pontiac Aztek again. I don't know. But anyways, he won all this money, and then he didn't pay taxes on it. So he went to jail for 51 months or prison for 51 months for tax evasion,
which is crazy. Tax evasion specifically on the money that he won for playing Survivor. It wasn't
plus some other money too. So the money from Survivor plus, so that's $1 million plus $327,000 that he earned as a co-host of a Boston radio show, which I guess he did, and then another $28,000 on in rent on a property that he owned.
And then,
and I'm assuming there's probably some on the car too.
Yeah.
I can't imagine he paid the taxes on that as well.
Well, do you think the car they gave it to him with payments? Or
No,
you're just saying like
you still have to. You still have to pay taxes on the because you won it.
Yeah.
Right.
But then also he had his sentence extended because he committed perjury
multiple times on the witness stand.
Which honestly,
on brand.
Yeah, 100%. I was shocked that he went to jail for tax evasion. But then when I found out about the perjury thing, I was like, honestly, I'm not that surprised about that part.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked. Like the 51 months seemed like a really long time to me.
Yeah, that's
and then there were like
years.
multiple counts of perjury. I was like, okay, that makes sense. But like, 51, that's a long time for, tax evasion. I guess it's serious, but I don't know, man. We put people in prison for a lot worse for a lot less time.
For real.
So I was like, 51 months, that's a lot. And then, the perjury, it's like, oh, well, I guess maybe you did it to yourself, buddy.
I wonder what his sentence was before the perjury.
I'm sure we could find out, but I don't really want to look it up.
That's fair.
But yeah, so that's all really interesting. But I think the most interesting thing about all of the stuff that developed after Survivor Borneo, and we'll talk about when we get to All Stars, there's some stuff that comes out of that, some scandal stuff and accusations and different things that come out of that are pretty serious and we should tackle once we've seen that season. Just because we haven't seen that, so I don't know all the details, but I know that there's some stuff that goes down there. But specifically, something that's very interesting about all this prison stuff is that when it rolled around in like 2009 or 2010 or whatever for season 20 for Heroes versus Villains, and they were casting, they planned on Richard being on the villains tribe.
Yeah, but
and
then
they couldn't.
Yeah, he was not allowed to be on Heroes versus Villains because he was on house arrest and was on parole.
Yeah.
So his
parole officer said no.
His parole officer said no to CBS, and Mark and Jeff had originally planned on getting him on the show and tried, but his parole officer said no, which is crazy considering that I'm sure the producers of that CBS were, and Jeff would have taken every measure to be in accordance with the law and to make it happen. And the fact that
I think they would have even had like a U.S. Marshal on the island the whole time, you know, like there just in case, you know, or we kind of joked, we were joking about it off recording, but like it would be if he was like there with an ankle monitor, that'd be hilarious on a Heroes versus Villains season. Just such a power.
Do you know
move.
how hard that would be though?
Yeah.
Like he rolls up and he is on the villains tribe, or like because originally they are like whenever in Heroes vs. Villains, I remember like, do you think you belong on the villains tribe? Like Richard's just there with the ankle monitor.
He just lifts up his ankle. He's like, I'm a bad boy, you know, or whatever. Yeah, no, that would be just crazy and iconic, and yeah, I don't know. That would have been wild, and I don't know. How many winners were on Heroes versus Villains?
Just one. Just Sandra.
Well, no, JT won.
JT had won at that point?
I think Tocantins happened 2 years before. So I think JT was a winner.
And Sandra.
So,
I think Sandra was the only villain winner.
Yeah, so I don't think there were any other winners, because Parvati's came after Heroes versus Villain, right?
And Boston Rob was after as well.
Yeah, he was also after. So I mean, Richard would have been, you know, only the second or third, winner in the game. I wonder, like, how far he would have gone. Apparently, he doesn't make it very far in All-Stars, and I wonder how far he makes it after All-Stars, when there's, like, apparently the stuff that comes out of that we'll get to when we get to that season, plus jail time, plus he's just pretty notorious, and everyone knows him. You know, like, if you play Survivor, you know who Richard Hatch is. Like, at the very least, even if you haven't seen every season, you probably go back and watch season 1 if you're going to go on Survivor. I'd be shocked if you didn't. So yeah, I don't know how far he'd make it. Part of me thinks probably not very far. I think he's probably voted out quite early. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about. I think, though, that, like, my theory, and this might not even be a theory. There might be factual information about this online. I just haven't looked it up. But my personal theory is probably that they planned on having Hatch, couldn't get him, so they had an open spot, and then that was what opened the door for Russell Hantz to come in and do back-to-back, like 2 weeks later, be on the next season.
Yeah.
Because they could not have been planning on Russell being there, because I think they probably were casting that months and months and months in advance.
Yeah, and they didn't know he was going to be a villain.
No. And well, they didn't know he was going to be a villain. He was going to play second. The world didn't even know who he was when they were recording that season, because it wasn't going to come out for a couple more months. Nobody on the island, Heroes vs. Villains, knew who he was. I wonder if they, like, gave them any info about him. That's stuff we can get to when we get to that season. That'll be an interesting thing to do some research and see what all they knew, because I don't actually know. But that's like what I think is, like, the most likely thing, is that they had an open spot and moved Russell in, or they kicked someone out to make room for Russell. That's something where then you could look at and be like, okay, who could they have booted? You could probably find online who the alternates were, you know, I'm sure, because they plan all that stuff out in advance. So we might be able to find that information later. But it's interesting to think that Richard could have been on that season, and I think he should have been if he wasn't a tax evader, you know, criminal.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, bro. Like, he said, what I think the most interesting thing is, he pleaded ignorance about the money and during the trial, and he claimed that he forgot to tell his accountants about some income. And then he thought the show's producers would pay his taxes. And it's just like, I don't know if he forgot to report the winnings from Survivor, or if that's just referring to the other income. But if it's the Survivor, how do you forget to tell your accountants Survivor? And if you have accountants,
I was about to say, his accountant definitely would have known.
They should know that he has to pay those taxes. So I don't know. It's crazy.
With how everywhere Survivor was, his accountant for sure knew that he won.
Yeah, they knew. His accountant saw $1 million come into the bank, or $600,000 come into the bank.
Yeah.
Granted, I don't know. He blamed it on his accountant, or he forgot to tell his accountants. So I don't know, man.
I think we need to get the accountant on this podcast and have him.
Yeah, that should be our first guest. Richard Hatch's.
Richard Hatch's.
I'm going to assume former accountant. Yeah. I can't imagine they're still
Hatch's
working together.
Former accountant. If you're listening to this, please come on our podcast.
Yeah, whoever you are, whether you're still accounting or not,
if you're still alive or not, because that was 20 years ago.
Yeah, but I guess So he won. 24 years ago. Yeah, that was a long time. So
if you're still alive and you want to be on two early 20s podcasts about Survivor, hit us up.
Yeah, we would love to learn more about these interesting matters. Or Richard Hatch. Let's just get him on the podcast.
Yeah, for real.
I think there's a lot of things that would be interesting to talk about. I do probably feel, though, like he probably is over talking about Survivor.
Oh, yeah, I would
imagine. I can't imagine, he won, 24 years ago. I
can't imagine
it's been a minute.
Can't imagine there's much to rehash.
Yeah, there's probably nothing in the world that hasn't already been said. And at this point, he probably doesn't even, the phenomenon where you recall an event and you tell how it happened, but you tell how it happened so many times that you aren't even remembering the event.
Like when I went to the Eras tour, I totally get what you're saying.
What?
Like when I went to the Eras tour, I get what you mean.
I don't know what you're talking about. Are you referring to something we've talked about before, or?
No, I'm saying like when I went to the Eras tour, that's how I feel.
That you don't even know if you remember. I don't think you know what I'm saying.
No, I do.
Okay, well, I'm saying like you misremember an event because you've told a story about it so many times that you start to wonder if you are just remembering
the
a fiction of it or what actually happened, And so it's like he's probably talked so much about Survivor over the last several years. Like, does he remember any of what actually, the true events of what happened? Like, obviously he remembers it, but
he's just remembering the story.
He's just remembering the way he's told it for 24 years. Like, that's kind of the way it is with a lot of stuff. Like, I don't know. Anytime I've ever talked about, my sports injuries when I played football or, any of that stuff, like, is that the way it happened? It's the way I remember it, but our memories are notoriously bad.
Yeah.
So,
one last thing before we close out this episode, I think would be fun to do. So, with this podcast, one thing we plan to do is dedicate an episode to talk about each season's winner, discuss their gameplay, if we think they deserve to win, they deserve $1 million, all that kind of stuff.
As well as dive into, their time in prison and all that stuff.
Their life after Survivor.
Yeah.
And
there are some interesting lives after Survivor that I'm interested to talk about. There's one winner coming up here very shortly that I'm actually really interested to do some research on and talk about.
And so I think one thing that would be really fun to do is kind of keep like a tallying list, ranking list of all the Survivor winners, like continue to rank them as we watch the seasons. So right now, Richard's number one, because we've only watched one season, but we have seen 44 and 45 together, so we could include D and Jam Jam in that ranking list if we wanted to.
I think the easiest one is to put Jam Jam at the top of the list of those three.
I would agree.
I think Jam Jam is a very strong winner. The way the Tika 3 were able to survive and maneuver their whole way through. Jam Jam he wasn't my favorite from that season, wouldn't have been my vote. Like I would have gone for Carson, like trying to get at the end.
If he was at the final three.
Yeah, he was at the final three. Like Carson was my favorite. And then probably at that final vote, I might have tossed a vote on Carolyn.
I think, honestly...
But honestly, I do think Jam Jam earned it.
We can talk about this later, but the fact that Carolyn didn't get any votes
is kind of a shame.
Angry.
But yeah, anyway, so yeah, I do think Jam Jam is the best winner of those three. Then I think there's really a good case can be made for either Richard or D. I think probably the best way to do this is tier list them.
Oh yeah, it's hard to just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I think you got to do them in tiers.
S, A, B, C, D, and then have them ranked within those.
Yeah,
tiers.
and so I think I would just start at, let's just call Jam Jam A tier,
and
we can move up or down.
Yeah.
As we add more people to this list. But if we're putting Jam Jam at A tier, I think Richard and D both sit in B tier.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think they are a step below Jam Jam, but they're still really good winners. But for very different reasons, played very different games, and in different games, I'm not even meaning like their gameplay. I'm saying they literally played different versions of Survivor.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's hard to equate the two, but I think they're on the same tier of like Richard invented the game and D played the game that Richard invented. Probably like some of the best that, anyone's really done in modern Survivor.
Yeah. I think the thing that for me differentiates D a little bit more from Richard, aside from the fact that Richard has like the impact that he's had on the game, but I think D played a better game in terms of the challenges, because D won 3 immunities and Richard won 1. I know the challenges are way different from what they used to be, but the fact that D
they're harder now, yeah.
Yeah, they're harder now. So the fact that D won 3 is extremely impressive.
Yeah, and it's almost like it's a little bit of a knock to Richard that he wasn't able to win, more than just the one.
And especially there towards the end when he's kind of the only man there who is pretty physical. Because, granted, he's not in the best shape.
There's not a lot of physical challenges there at the end, though.
But,
which is like
the fact that the last challenge is you just hold on to a pole, that takes no physicality at all. He for sure could have won it if he really tried. He just literally was like, yeah, I'm just not going to try him to beat Kelly.
Yeah, and I think that was like, we didn't really touch on that, but I think that's a really key strategic moment on his part, is that he sat there, he did the math, and he knew he was going to the final 2. Like, I think he sat down 100% confident that he was going, because here's the thing. Rudy wins, he's taking Richard.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And if Kelly wins,
she knows she can't beat Rudy.
He either knows he's taking the gamble that she picks him, or she loses to Rudy. He wins either way.
Yeah.
Like, I think he views it as a win either way. And even though I think he knows he loses to Rudy, he still knows he gets himself to the final 2, which is all that matters.
Yeah.
And so he's like, you know what? I'm not even going to mess with it, which kind of risky because there was chance of losing Rudy's vote. But that also shows like how good of a social game he played, that he knew Rudy well enough to know that his word was good and he was not going to change that, that he would vote for him, he would take him with him. So he could have really endangered that relationship if it was someone else, but he knew Rudy. He may not have known what shirt was Jenna's, or some of the other silly trivia, but he knew Rudy, and I think that was a very key, strong strategic moment. And so, like, yes, he gave up that challenge, air quotes, gave up, but I think, like, he played such a strong strategic game. Like, in that, like, I think there were a lot of challenges that he didn't care if he won.
Yeah.
Like, even the one that he needed to win on his birthday where he would have been voted out, I don't think he desperately cared if he won. He was going to try, but I think he always felt secure in where he was at, and it was almost his downfall. But he had built up good enough alliance around him that he didn't need to be physical. Whereas D, like, knew she was the target, like, she had to, like, go hard.
Yeah.
It's a little different. So, like, I would maybe give Richard the edge over D a little bit, but it's hard for me to differentiate between the two, and that could also just be recency bias because I saw that more recently in season 45. But I definitely think they're in the same tier, just for different reasons.
Yeah, I can agree with that. All right, well, thanks for tuning in to our episode of Idle Talk, a Survivor podcast. Hope you enjoyed, and have a great day.
We'll see you next time.